pack your things and get out. Those 6 words, delivered with the cold precision of a corporate termination, shattered 23 years of my life in an instant. I stood in the marble foyer of what had been our home, the sprawling mansion in Belmont Heights that I'd helped design, decorate, and turn into a sanctuary, clutching a single black duffel bag. My husband David stood behind me, his arms crossed, while his secretary-turned-girlfriend Jessica perched on my Italian leather sofa like she owned the place, which, apparently, she now did. "Laura, don't make this harder than it needs to be," David said, his voice carrying that patronising tone I'd grown to hate over the past year. "The papers are signed. The house is mine. My lawyer made sure of that." I should have been crying. I should have been begging. Instead, I felt something cold and sharp crystallising in my chest, something that would serve me well in the years to come. "You're really going to let her keep just one bag?" Jessica asked, her voice dripping with fake concern. "I mean, 23 years of marriage, shouldn't she get something?" David shrugged. "She signed the prenup. She gets nothing." The prenup? The document I'd signed at 22, young and stupidly in love, trusting that our marriage would last forever. The document that gave me nothing if I was found at fault for the divorce, and David's team of lawyers had made sure to paint my one moment of weakness as the crime of the century. "Besides," David continued, "it's not like she contributed anything real. Interior decorating isn't exactly a career." The laughter that bubbled up from the living room made my jaw clench. Jessica's friends, my former friends, were sprawled across my furniture, sipping wine from my collection, treating my downfall like entertainment. Did you see her face when the process server showed up at the country club? That was Miranda, who I'd known since college. I thought she was going to faint right into her tennis whites. "The best part was when she tried to call David for help," added Stephanie, another former friend. "Like, honey, he's the one divorcing you." Their giggles echoed through the house like breaking glass. Jessica stood up, smoothing down her pencil skirt, one that probably cost more than most people's rent, funded by my husband's money. "Laura, sweetie, I just want you to know there are no hard feelings. David and I, what we have is special. You understand, right? Special. Like the special relationship they'd been conducting in hotel rooms for the past 18 months while I'd been planning our 25th anniversary party." "Of course," I said quietly. "True love always wins." The sarcasm sailed right over her perfectly highlighted head. "Exactly," she beamed, then looked around the living room with obvious satisfaction. "I just love what you've done with this place. We'll definitely be keeping most of the decor. You have such quaint taste." Quaint. My interior design work, featured in Architectural Digest twice, was quaint. I adjusted my grip on the duffel bag. Inside were the only things I'd been allowed to take. Some clothes, my laptop, my phone, and my grandmother's jewellery. The only items that were legally mine according to that damned prenup. "The Uber is here," David announced, glancing at his phone. "Time to go." "Where will you stay?" Jessica asked, her head tilted in mock sympathy. "I mean, without any friends or family in the city, it must be scary starting over at 45. She was right about one thing. I had nowhere to go. My parents were dead. My sister lived across the country and we barely spoke. The friends I'd thought I had were currently drinking wine in what used to be my living room, placing bets on how long it would take me to come crawling back. "I'll figure something out," I said. David pulled out his wallet and extracted $300 bills. "Here, for the first few nights, consider it a severance package. $300. For 23 years of marriage, for building his social connections, for hosting the dinner parties that landed him his biggest clients, for being the perfect trophy wife while he climbed the corporate ladder. I stared at the money in his outstretched hand. "Keep it," I said. "I don't need your charity." His eyes flashed with annoyance. "Don't be stupid, Laura. You have no money, no job, no skills. Take the cash." "I said no." The room fell silent. Even Jessica's gaggle of followers stopped their chattering to watch the show. "Fine," David snapped, "but don't come crying to me when you're living in a homeless shelter." I walked toward the front door, my heels clicking against the marble floor I'd selected personally from a quarry in Italy. At the threshold, I turned back. "David?" "What?" "When you're lying in our bed tonight, remember that everything you think you've won, I helped you build it." His face darkened. "You didn't build anything. You just spent my money and played house." I smiled, really smiled, for the first time in months. "We'll see about that." The Uber driver was a kind man in his 60s who didn't ask questions when I gave him the address of the cheapest motel I could find on my phone. As we pulled away from Belmont Heights, I caught a glimpse of the mansion in the rearview mirror, all glass and stone and perfect landscaping, glowing like a beacon in the twilight. "Starting over?" the driver asked gently. "Something like that." "I did that once, left everything behind at 58. Thought it was the end of the world." "Was it?" he chuckled. "Turned out to be the beginning of a much better one." The motel was exactly as grim as I'd expected. Peeling paint, flickering neon sign, the lingering smell of industrial disinfectant, and broken dreams. The desk clerk, a tired-looking woman with kind eyes, slid a key across the scarred counter. "How long you staying, honey?" "I'm not sure yet." She nodded knowingly. "Rooms paid for 3 nights. After that, we'll figure something out." It wasn't until I was alone in the cramped room, sitting on the edge of a bed that had seen better decades, that the reality hit me. I had no home, no income, no support system. David was right about one thing. I had no marketable skills beyond what he dismissively called playing house. But as I opened my laptop and stared at the blank screen, I remembered something he'd forgotten. I might not have built his empire with my own hands, but I knew where all the bodies were buried. For 23 years, I'd been the perfect wife, charming at dinner parties, discreet about business dealings, silent about the corners David cut and the favours he traded. I'd hosted senators and CEOs, listened to their wives' complaints, observed their children's scandals. I knew which board member was embezzling funds, which senator was taking bribes, which CEO was cooking the books. I'd been David's greatest asset and he'd thrown me away like garbage. Big mistake. I opened a new document and began to type. The Belmont Heights Wives, an inside look at power, privilege, and secrets. By the time the sun rose over the motel parking lot, I had written the first chapter of what would become either my salvation or my destruction. I wasn't sure which, but for the first time since the divorce papers arrived, I felt something besides despair. I felt dangerous. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Heard about the divorce? Coffee sometime? A friend who remembers?" I stared at the message, trying to place the number. Then it hit me. Robert Chen, a journalist I'd met years ago at one of David's networking events. We'd talked about my design work, but also about the stories that lived behind the perfect facades of Belmont Heights. Stories I was suddenly very interested in telling. I typed back, "Tomorrow, 10 a.m, I have something you'll want to hear." His response was immediate. "Looking forward to it." I closed the laptop and looked around the dingy motel room that was now my world. David thought he'd won. Jessica thought she'd claimed the prize. My former friends thought I was finished. They had no idea what was coming. But they would learn soon enough that when you destroy a woman who has nothing left to lose, you better make sure you bury her deep, enough that she can't claw her way back up. Because I was already digging. Robert Chen looked exactly the same as he had 5 years ago. Sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, the kind of focused intensity that made sources spill secrets they'd sworn to take to their graves. We met at a small cafe downtown, far from the polished establishments of Belmont Heights, where I might run into familiar faces. "Laura," he said, standing as I approached, "you look like hell." I slid into the booth across from him. "It's been a rough week." He studied my face with the analytical gaze of someone who made a living reading people. "Different, focused, dangerous, maybe?" "Good. That's exactly what I was going for." Our waitress, a college-aged girl with purple hair and tired eyes, poured coffee without being asked. I wrapped my hands around the mug, letting the warmth seep into my fingers. Strange how quickly you learn to appreciate small comforts when everything else is stripped away. "So," Robert said, "your text mentioned you had something I'd want to hear." I pulled out a thick folder from my laptop bag. 23 years of being the perfect Belmont Heights wife. 23 years of hosting dinner parties where drunk politicians discussed classified information. 23 years of charity galas where CEOs bragged about their creative accounting. Robert's eyebrows rose as I slid the folder across the table. "You kept records?" "I kept everything. Photos, audio recordings from my phone when I thought I was just capturing memories, emails that were CC'd to me because wives are invisible, guest lists with dates and times." I leaned forward. "Did you know Senator Williams took $250,000 from defense contractors to kill the Environmental Protection Bill? Or that Thomas Brennan from Apex Financial has been laundering money through his Children's Art Foundation?" Robert opened the folder, his expression shifting from interested to shocked to absolutely riveted. "Jesus, Laura, this is Pulitzer material." "I know." I took a sip of coffee, savouring the bitter taste and Robert's expression. "But there's a catch." "There always is. I don't just want to expose them. I want to destroy them. All of them. David, Jessica, every single person who stood in my living room and laughed at my humiliation." My voice stayed level, conversational. "Can you help me do that?" Robert was quiet for a long moment, flipping through pages of evidence. Finally, he looked up. "What do you want in return?" 50% of whatever this generates. Book deals, movie rights, speaking engagements. And I want to co-write everything. This is my story, my research, my revenge. I'm not just your source. I'm your partner. That's unusual. So is having this much dirt on some of the most powerful people in the state. He laughed, a short bark of appreciation. "You've changed since David's Christmas party in 2019. That woman was weak. She believed in playing by rules that were rigged against her." I gestured around the modest cafe. "This woman has nothing left to lose and everything to prove." "All right." Robert closed the folder. "Partners. But we do this right. Verify everything, build an airtight case. These people have armies of lawyers. They also have enemies. I know where the bodies are buried, remember? Including who has the shovels." Over the next hour, we outlined our strategy. Robert would begin with the smaller fish, the local politicians and mid-level executives who couldn't fight back as hard. Meanwhile, I would work on the book, starting with my insider's view of their world. "There's something else," I said as we prepared to leave. "I need a place to stay. The motel is temporary." Robert hesitated. "I have a guest room. It's not much, but I'll pay rent." "With what money?" I smiled, pulling out my phone to show him a notification. "My grandmother's jewellery sold at auction this morning. Turns out that quaint necklace David always mocked was a genuine Cartier piece from 1924. The ring was even better. Tiffany with provenance." Robert's eyes widened at the number on the screen. "That's substantial. Enough to get started. Enough to be dangerous." 3 weeks later, I was settled into Robert's spare room, which had become our war room. The walls were covered with flowcharts connecting names, dates, and scandals. My laptop lived on the small desk where I'd written 40,000 words of the most explosive tell-all book Belmont Heights had ever seen. My phone rang. David's name appeared on the screen. Well, I answered. To what do I owe the pleasure? Laura, what the hell do you think you're doing? His voice was tight with barely controlled rage. I'm sorry, you'll have to be more specific. I do so many things these days. Don't play dumb. Senator Williams called me. He said some journalist has been asking questions about the defense contract vote. Questions that could only come from someone who was at my house that night. I felt a warm glow of satisfaction. Robert's first article had published that morning, though it only scratched the surface of what we knew. Gosh, David, that does sound concerning. I hope the senator didn't do anything improper. You signed an NDA about social gatherings in my home. Actually, I signed an NDA about your business dealings. But Senator Williams isn't your business partner, is he? He's just a family friend who happened to get very drunk at your Christmas party and start bragging about his vote-selling scheme. The silence on the other end was deafening. You're making a mistake, Laura. These people don't just roll over, they fight back. I'm counting on it. I hung up. Robert looked up from his laptop where he was fact-checking my latest chapter. Trouble? The opposite. They're scared. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. David told me what you're doing. This is beneath you. Can we talk? I showed Robert the message. He grinned. Should you respond? Oh, absolutely. I typed back, coffee tomorrow. Same place where you told Miranda you were planning to redecorate my bedroom before the divorce was even final? Her response was immediate. How did you... See you at 2 p.m. Come alone. The next afternoon, Jessica walked into the cafe looking like she'd stepped off a magazine cover. Perfect hair, designer handbag, the kind of confidence that money and good looks can buy. She spotted me in the corner booth and froze. I'd deliberately chosen to dress down. Jeans, a simple sweater, minimal makeup. But I'd also chosen the corner booth because it put my back to the wall and gave me clear sight lines to every entrance. Prison habits, as it turned out, were useful in all kinds of situations. Laura. She slid into the seat across from me, her smile bright and fake. You look nervous. Her laugh was strained. Why would I be nervous? I pulled out my phone and placed it on the table between us. Because I have 17 minutes of audio from Miranda's kitchen during your girls' night 3 months ago. The night you all planned how to make sure I'd be completely humiliated during the divorce proceedings. The colour drained from her face. That's illegal. Recording people without consent is perfectly legal in this state as long as one party consents. And since Miranda invited me to that party, and I was physically present when you were discussing it. I shrugged. I consented to recording myself. What do you want? Information. About what? About the real reason David divorced me. I leaned forward. Because we both know it wasn't about my supposed affair with the tennis instructor. Jessica's perfectly applied makeup couldn't hide the way her face tightened. I don't know what you mean. David's gambling debts, the money missing from client accounts, the reason he needed a quick divorce with a prenup that left me with nothing. I smiled pleasantly. See, Jessica, you thought you were getting a rich husband. But David's broke. Has been for 2 years. The house, the cars, the lifestyle, it's all leverage to the hilt. She opened her mouth, then closed it, then opened it again like a fish gasping for air. The man you destroyed my marriage for is about to lose everything. And when that happens, guess who the authorities are going to look at first? The secretary who suddenly had access to all the client accounts. You're lying. I slid a piece of paper across the table. Bank records, obtained through perfectly legal channels during the divorce discovery process. David's been transferring money to cover his gambling losses for 18 months. Check the dates. They correspond exactly with when you started working late together. Jessica stared at the papers, her hand shaking slightly. Here's what's going to happen, I continued conversationally. You're going to tell me everything David has been hiding. Every account, every debt, every shady deal. And in return, I'll make sure you have enough information to protect yourself when this whole house of cards comes tumbling down. And if I don't, then you'll go down with him. Your choice. She was quiet for a long moment, staring at the evidence of David's financial ruin. Finally, she looked up at me with something I'd never seen in her eyes before. Respect. How long have you known? I suspected for months. I confirmed it yesterday. I flagged down the waitress. We're going to need more coffee. This is going to take a while. By the time Jessica left the cafe 2 hours later, I had enough information to bring down not just David, but half of his business associates. She talked about shell companies, offshore accounts, client money used to pay personal debts, a financial crime spree that made my original evidence look like parking tickets. My phone rang as I walked back to Robert's place. Unknown number. Laura Whitmore. Yes? This is Detective Morrison with the Financial Crimes Unit. We'd like to speak with you about your ex-husband's business practices. I stopped walking. I see. Would you be available to come in tomorrow morning? We have some questions, and we understand you might have some information that could be helpful. Detective Morrison, I said slowly, I think you're going to find that I have a lot more than just helpful information. Is that so? That's so. And I think we're going to get along very well. As I hung up, I realised I was smiling for the first time in months. Not the bitter smile of revenge, but genuine happiness. The game was just getting started. Detective Morrison turned out to be a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who reminded me of myself, someone who'd learned to see through polished facades to the rot underneath. We met in a sterile conference room that smelled of burnt coffee and broken dreams. Mrs. Whitmore, she began, then caught herself. Miss Whitmore, sorry. Laura is fine. I set my laptop bag on the table. And I prefer the correction. That marriage feels like a previous lifetime. She opened a thick file. We've been investigating your ex-husband's firm for 6 months. Financial irregularities, client complaints, suspicious transfers. But we've hit walls. David Whitmore is very good at covering his tracks. He had help. From you? I laughed short and sharp. Detective, for 23 years I was the perfect trophy wife. I signed papers without reading them, smiled at dinner parties and never asked questions about money. David's mistake was assuming I was as stupid as I looked. Detective Morrison leaned forward. What changed? He threw me away like garbage, and garbage has a way of revealing all the dirty secrets people thought they'd buried. Over the next 3 hours, I walked her through everything. The shell companies David used to hide gambling losses, the client funds he'd borrowed to cover debts, the fake investment schemes he'd sold to friends who trusted him. I had names, dates, account numbers, and, most importantly, recordings. Jesus, Detective Morrison muttered, scrolling through the audio files on my laptop. How did you get all this? 23 years of dinner parties where drunk men forgot wives have ears. David always said I was good at blending into the background. I smiled. Turns out that was my greatest asset. This is enough to put him away for 15 years minimum. Maybe 20 with the RICO charges. Good. But there's more. I pulled out the flash drive Jessica had given me the night before. Our second meeting, this one in her car in a grocery store parking lot. She'd been terrified, shaking as she handed over copies of files she'd downloaded before David could delete them. David's secretary turned, Detective Morrison said, examining the drive's contents. Why? Because she realised she was going to be the fall guy, David's been setting her up to take the blame for months. Forged signatures, fabricated emails, the works. I just opened her eyes to the truth. My phone buzzed with a text from Robert. "You need to see the news. Now." I excused myself and stepped outside to call him. "Turn on Channel 7, he said without preamble. I found a TV in the police station's waiting area. The local news was running a breaking story. Belmont Heights businessman under federal investigation. David's photo filled the screen, the professional headshot from his company website, where he looked distinguished and trustworthy. The reporter's voice was crisp with excitement. Sources close to the investigation say David Whitmore, prominent real estate developer and political donor, is being questioned about alleged financial crimes involving millions of dollars. "Laura," Detective Morrison appeared beside me, "you might want to see this?" She led me back to the conference room, where her laptop displayed a different news feed. This one showed FBI agents carrying boxes out of David's office building. In the background, I could see him in handcuffs being led to a federal vehicle. "We coordinated with the FBI on this one," Detective Morrison explained. "The federal charges are more serious. Wire fraud, money laundering, racketeering. He won't be getting bail." I watched my ex-husband's perp walk in complete silence. For 23 years, this man had controlled every aspect of my life. Now, he couldn't even control his own freedom. "There's something else," Detective Morrison continued. "The mansion in Belmont Heights, it's being seized as part of the investigation. Turns out it was purchased with stolen client funds. The mansion, my beautiful, perfect prison, where Jessica was probably sitting right now, planning her new life as David's wife. What happens to people living there? They have 48 hours to vacate." My phone rang. Jessica's name appeared on the screen. "Excuse me," I told Detective Morrison, stepping away to answer. "Laura," Jessica's voice was hysterical, "you have to help me. They're saying I have to leave the house. They took David and I don't know what's happening and—" "Slow down," I said calmly. "Where are you?" "At the house. There are FBI agents everywhere, and they have a warrant and they're taking everything." She was sobbing now. "I don't have anywhere to go. My apartment lease ended when I moved in with David, and all my money is in joint accounts they froze." "That's terrible," I said, not meaning it at all. "You have to help me. I know you hate me, but I'm begging you. I'll do anything." I looked through the conference room window at Detective Morrison, who was still reviewing my evidence. Evidence that would put dozens of Belmont Heights elite behind bars. Evidence that had already destroyed the man who threw me away like trash. "Jessica," I said quietly, "do you remember what you said to me the day I left, about how I had nowhere to go and no one to help me?" Her sobbing stopped. "Laura, please. You said it must be scary starting over at 45 with no friends or family. I was wrong. I was cruel. I'm sorry. You also said I had no skills and no future. I watched an FBI agent carry another box out of David's office on the TV screen. You were wrong about that too. Laura, good luck, Jessica. I hope you figure something out." I hung up and blocked her number. Detective Morrison rejoined me. "Everything all right?" "Perfect, actually. What happens next, Soames?" "We'll need you to testify when this goes to trial. With your evidence and cooperation, we're looking at convictions for David and at least a dozen co-conspirators." "Including Senator Williams?" "Especially Senator Williams." 3 months later, I stood in the witness box in a federal courthouse, my hand on a Bible, swearing to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. The courtroom was packed. Media, federal prosecutors, defense attorneys, and, in the gallery, some familiar faces from Belmont Heights, who looked like they'd aged years in the past few months. David sat at the defendant's table in an orange jumpsuit, his expensive suits and perfect hair now just memories. He wouldn't look at me, but I could see the tension in his shoulders every time I spoke. Excuse me, Miss Whitmore, the prosecutor said. Can you tell the court about the dinner party at your former home on December 15th, 2022? Of course. That was the night Senator Williams discussed selling his vote on the Environmental Protection Bill to defence contractors. He was quite intoxicated and very proud of the $250,000 he'd received. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Senator Williams' attorney objected, but the prosecutor had audio evidence to back up my testimony. And the charity gala on March 3rd, 2023? That's when Thomas Brennan from Apex Financial explained how he was laundering money through his Children's Art Foundation. He thought it was quite clever. More murmurs, more objections, more evidence. For 4 days, I systematically dismantled the network of corruption that had flourished in Belmont Heights for decades. Every dinner party, every golf outing, every casual conversation where powerful men had assumed their secrets were safe with the invisible trophy wife. They weren't. When I finally stepped down from the witness stand, I felt lighter than I had in years. Not because it was over, the trial would continue for months, but because I had finally told the truth about the world I'd lived in for so long. Outside the courthouse, Robert was waiting with a bottle of champagne and a huge grin. "How does it feel?" he asked. "Like justice." The book comes out next week. Pre-orders are through the roof. Netflix is interested in the rights. And 3 other women have contacted my editor. Apparently, you've inspired a whole movement of ex-wives ready to tell their stories. I looked back at the courthouse where my former life was being dissected and judged. Inside, David was probably realizing that his perfect plan to discard his old life and start fresh had backfired spectacularly. "You know what the best part is?" I told Robert as we walked toward his car. "What?" "They all think this is the end of their problems. David thinks once he serves his time he can rebuild. Jessica thinks she can disappear and start over. Senator Williams thinks he can plea bargain his way to a reduced sentence." Robert raised an eyebrow. "And they can't?" I smiled, the same smile that had terrified David during our last phone call. "Robert, honey, this was just the beginning. Wait until you see what I have planned for phase 2. Because while everyone was focused on the federal trial, I'd been quietly buying up properties, making investments, and building something new. Something that would make my revenge complete in ways they couldn't even imagine yet. The real surprise was still coming. 6 months after David's conviction, I stood in the marble foyer of the Belmont Heights mansion, my mansion now, watching the movers carry in furniture I'd personally selected. Not the gaudy, expensive pieces David had preferred, but elegant, understated items that spoke of real wealth rather than desperate displays of it. "Miss Whitmore?" The real estate agent, a nervous young man named Kevin, approached with his tablet. "The final paperwork is ready for your signature." I signed my name with a flourish. Laura Whitmore, sole owner of the property that had once been my prison. The irony was delicious. "I still can't believe it sold for so little at the federal auction," Kevin said, shaking his head. "Properties like this usually go for 10 times what you paid." "Funny how scandal affects property values," I replied, not mentioning that I'd spent months quietly discouraging other potential buyers through carefully placed stories about the house being cursed and tainted by criminal activity. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Congratulations on your new home. An old friend." I frowned, then deleted the message. Probably another journalist trying to get an interview about my book, which had spent 12 weeks on the bestseller list and was currently being adapted into a limited series, starring Reese Witherspoon. The doorbell rang. Through the security camera, I saw Jessica standing on the front steps, looking haggard and desperate. She'd aged terribly over the past year, her designer wardrobe replaced with discount store clothing, her perfect hair now showing dark roots, her face gaunt from stress and what I suspected was a drinking problem. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. "Hello, Jessica, you look I paused, pretending to search for the right word. Tired. Laura, please. I know you hate me, but I'm desperate. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her voice hoarse. I lost my apartment. I'm living in my car. I just need... Need what? Money? A job reference? A place to stay? I leaned against the doorframe. Funny, I remember being in a similar situation not too long ago. What was it you said? That I should figure something out? I was horrible to you, I know that. But I've lost everything. David left me with nothing. And now, with his conviction, no one will hire me. I can't even get a job at a retail store because my name comes up in all the news articles. That must be frustrating. I'll do anything. Clean your house, work in your garden, answer phones. I don't care. I just need help. I studied her for a long moment, then stepped aside. Come in. Jessica's eyes widened as she took in the restored mansion. I'd erased every trace of David's gaudy taste, replacing it with museum-quality pieces and artwork that whispered wealth rather than screaming it. It's beautiful, she said quietly. Thank you. I had a good teacher in what not to do. I led her to the sitting room where we'd once mocked my desperation. Please, sit. She perched on the edge of an antique chair, as if afraid she might stain it. You want a job? I said. I might have one. Hope flared in her eyes. Really? I'm expanding my business ventures. I need someone to handle certain delicate situations. Someone who understands how this world works but is desperate enough to be completely loyal. What kind of business? I smiled. The kind that deals with people who think they're untouchable. Jessica looked confused, but before she could ask questions, my phone rang. Robert's name appeared on the screen. Excuse me, I answered. What's up? Laura, you need to see this. Channel 7, right now. I grabbed the remote and turned on the massive TV that dominated one wall. A breaking news banner scrolled across the bottom. Federal investigation expands to include more Belmont Heights elites. The reporter stood outside a familiar office building. Sources confirm that the FBI has executed search warrants at 5 more locations connected to the David Whitmore financial crimes case. Among those being questioned today are prominent attorney William Nash, City Councilman Trevor Hayes, and philanthropist Margaret Sterling. Jessica gasped. Those were all people from our old social circle, people who had laughed at my humiliation and celebrated my downfall. How is this possible? She whispered. I thought the investigation was over. Oh, Jessica! I muted the TV and turned to her with a smile that made her shrink back. Did you really think I was done after taking down David? Her face went pale. What do you mean? I mean that for the past 6 months, while everyone thought I was basking in my book deal success, I've been systematically destroying every single person who wronged me. I leaned forward. Remember Miranda, who hosted that lovely party where you all planned my humiliation? Turns out her husband's law firm has been laundering money for Russian oligarchs. The FBI is very interested in that. Jessica's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. And Stephanie, who laughed so hard when I was served divorce papers. Her charity for underprivileged children has been stealing donations for years. The IRS found that fascinating. You're insane, Jessica breathed. Am I? Or am I just very, very thorough? I stood up and walked to the window overlooking the garden, where they had all once stood drinking my wine and celebrating my destruction. You see, Jessica, everyone made the same mistake. You all assumed that because I was quiet, I was weak. Because I smiled and played the perfect wife, I was stupid. My phone buzzed with another text from that unknown number. Impressive work, though I think you missed someone. This time, I didn't delete it. Something about the timing felt deliberate. Who are you? I typed back. The response was immediate. Check your security cameras. Front gate. I pulled up the camera feed on my phone. A sleek black car sat outside the gate, but I couldn't see inside due to the tinted windows. Jessica, I need you to leave, I said, my attention focused on the screen. But what about the job? There is no job. I just wanted to see you beg. I didn't look away from my phone. Use the service entrance. And, Jessica, if you ever come here again, I'll have you arrested for trespassing. She left without another word, probably too broken to even protest. I watched the security feed as Jessica's beat-up Honda pulled out of the driveway, passing the mysterious black car. The car's door opened and a figure stepped out, tall, elegant, wearing a designer coat that probably cost more than most people's cars. My blood turned to ice. Margaret Sterling, the woman whose husband I just helped the FBI arrest an hour ago. The queen bee of Belmont Heights society, the one person whose approval had once meant everything to me. The woman who'd stood in this very house and called me pathetic when David threw me out. She approached the front door with the confidence of someone who'd never been denied anything in her life. When the doorbell rang, I almost didn't answer. But curiosity won. Margaret stood on my doorstep looking exactly as she always had, immaculate, powerful, completely in control. Her silver hair was perfect, her makeup flawless, her smile sharp as a blade. "Hello, Laura. Lovely home. I should know. I helped your husband pick it out." The words hit like a slap. "Excuse me?" "Oh, you didn't know?" Margaret's smile widened. "Darling, who do you think told David about your affair with the tennis instructor? Who do you think gave him the idea for such a clean, profitable divorce?" The world tilted. "What are you talking about? I never had an affair." "Of course you didn't. But I had photos staged that suggested otherwise. A few carefully edited images, some strategically placed witnesses." She shrugged elegantly. "David was drowning in gambling debts and needed liquid assets fast. Divorcing you freed up millions in joint property." I stared at her, my mind reeling. "You orchestrated my divorce?" "I orchestrated your life, dear. Your marriage, your social standing, your eventual fall from grace. You were always so useful. The perfect hostess, the ideal cover for our less savoury business dealings. But when David needed an exit strategy, you became the perfect sacrifice." "Why are you telling me this?" Margaret stepped closer, her eyes glittering with something that might have been pride. "Because I'm impressed. What you've accomplished in the past year, the investigation, the convictions, the systematic destruction of everyone who wronged you, it's exactly what I would have done." She reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. "I have a proposition for you, Laura. You've proven you understand power, revenge, and long-term planning. I could use someone with your talents." I looked at the card. It was elegant, expensive, with just a name and phone number. No company, no title. "What exactly are you proposing?" "Partnership. You see, I've been running a very profitable operation for decades, one that requires absolute discretion and complete ruthlessness. David's arrest was unfortunate, but not unexpected. I've been looking for a replacement, someone intelligent enough to see the bigger picture." "And you think that's me?" "Darling, you just spent a year destroying the most powerful people in the state, using nothing but patience and evidence. You bought this house out from under your ex-husband's mistress and turned his own secretary against him. You're not a victim seeking revenge anymore. You're a predator who's learned to hunt." Margaret's words echoed in the marble foyer, and I realised with crystal clarity that she was right. Somewhere along the way, I'd stopped being Laura, the wronged wife, and become something else entirely, something dangerous. I looked at the business card again, then at Margaret's expectant face. "When do I start?" Margaret's smile was sharp as winter. "You already have." As the black car disappeared down the driveway, I stood in my reclaimed mansion and understood the truth. I hadn't just gotten my revenge. I'd gotten my education, and class was just beginning.